Hello everybody, I hope you are all doing well. We are back again today with another Abyss guide for you all. Fortunately, Hoyoverse was a bit kinder to us this month than last month, so getting 36 stars here will be a bit less of an uphill battle. Anyways, if you're new here, we do things a little different than you might expect. We break down any relevant enemy info and then go into strategies and team building approaches for each chamber, then discuss overall planning and tips at the end. And when we talk teams, I won't simply say X or Y team is the best, as that's just not very useful advice because most people don't have access to every character in the game. Instead, I'll go over things like the best reactions and archetypes, that way you can hopefully apply it to your exact situation. Anyways, before we hop into it, if this video helps you, please don't forget to leave a like and let me know in the comments, and share the video with your friends that might need it. Of course, if you are not already, please consider subscribing for more Genshin content. But yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it with the Blessing of Abyssal Moon and Leyline disorders. The Abyssal Moon Blessing for this month triggers a shockwave whenever you trigger a cryo reaction. As I always say, this buff generally is not something that's worth building around, and is something that you can just treat as a little bonus if you happen to naturally be able to trigger it. The innate Hydro Aura on 2 of the first half chambers is something that may end up being able to give you free procs of this, but we'll go more into cryo characters when we talk about the individual chambers. Our first half buff is a 75% Geo skill damage bonus. This is mostly useful for Chiori and Navia, and kind of Albedo, but he sucks so it doesn't matter. Navia is a very strong unit on this first half thanks to this buff. We'll talk more about that in each individual chamber, but Navia and Chiori havers are the big winners of this one. If you don't have either of them, well, unfortunately you don't get a Leyline disorder on either side because our second half buff is a 75% cryo skill damage bonus, which literally no characters in the game can use. We can pretty reasonably infer that this will likely be utilized by Escoffier, but I don't follow leaks much, and I don't want to give any leak info here in case someone watching does not want to see leaks, so this remains just as an educated guess. Even if this is the case, this patch runs for about 2/3 of the current Abyss duration, so when Escoffier does release, if she can even utilize this buff, it'll be towards the end of the Abyss. Kind of a weird decision from Hoyoverse on this one, but yeah, as of the release of this video, there might as well be no second half Leyline disorder. Starting things off with Chamber 1 first half, we have a single Hydro Tulpa with 3.7 million HP. It has Hydro immunity and a constant Hydro aura. The Tulpa's attacks are very hard hitting, so be ready to dodge like a madman or bring a strong shield. The main mechanic to look out for is its absorb. Periodically, little half Tulpas will spawn around the arena. These guys do an inconsequential amount of damage, and the main threat of them is when the big Tulpa begins to absorb them. You must prevent him from absorbing them, as allowing him to successfully absorb one will give him a heavy damage buff and, more importantly, a 45% increase to all res. This lasts until he does 2 attacks. Killing the half Tulpas is pretty easy. They have fairly weak elemental gauge shield, and when the shield breaks, they will immediately die. The most effective element at killing them is Dendro, followed by Cryo, followed by Geo, Animo, and Pyro, followed by Electro, and of course, immunity to Hydro. You can also damage the regular HP under the shield, but the shield is so flimsy that this pretty much doesn't matter. Since they're pretty easy to kill and their damage is not a problem, you don't have to immediately hunt them down after they spawn. You can kinda catch it with some AoE attacks, or do something small that costs little to no time, like marking them with Nahida E during your support rotation. But in general, you can just wait for the big Tulpa to begin absorbing it before you even give it a second thought. Once he begins absorbing, just bonk the little Tulpa and continue hitting the main one. If for some reason your team is not able to consistently kill the small Tulpa while it is being absorbed, then you should begin hunting them down when they spawn. Alternatively, you can bring some form of res shred. While this will not completely counteract the res increase, and you'll still be doing less damage than before it absorbed, it can help alleviate the punishment from letting the boss absorb. Since the res increase is not too terribly long lasting, this is a fine solution that allows you to kinda just turn your brain off and hit the boss without any regard for any special mechanics. Other than that, the main gimmick of this boss is his innate Hydro aura. You can use it against him to trigger Hydro related reactions without actually using a Hydro character. Aggravate or Quicken teams will be extremely effective here, as the Electro charged aura allows your Dendro hits to trigger both Quicken and Bloom in the same hit. And subsequently, your Electro units can Hyper Bloom off those blooms. Dendro also has the added bonus of being the best element for killing the mini Tulpas. Pyro DPS will also be great here, as they get infinite free waves without needing any Hydro supports, allowing you to dedicate all 3 other team slots to buffing up your DPS. For the same reasons as Aggravate and Hyper Bloom, Overload is quite good here as well. The Electrocharged Aura allows your Pyro hits to trigger both Vaporize and Overload in the same hit, allowing you to get Vaporize reactions while still being under the restrictions of Chevreuse, which is just using Pyro and Electro. You can also just completely ignore the Hydro aura and play characters that do a high amount of raw damage without any reactions needed. Think characters like Chaska or Navia. Though do be careful running teams like this, as a lot of the time they utilize Furina's huge damage buff, and while Furina is not necessarily useless here, bringing her against Hydro immune enemies will completely neutralize her personal damage, so she'll have heavily reduced value compared to normal. Now I mentioned the first half Leyline bonus being a 75% Geo skill damage bonus, and I talked about how Navia and Chiori are the big winners there. Well, they are also great for this boss. Both of them have great personal damage without needing to react, and though they are typically both seen with Farina a lot, you can completely forget about her here, as this Leyline buff gives them both 75% damage for free. The Hydro Aurora on the enemy also gives Navia an endless supply of shotgun bullets, and actually allows you to do some funny mono-geo Navia stuff since you don't need another element for those crystallized procs. Another thing to consider when team building for this chamber is that the boss moves around a lot, so you may benefit from bringing highly mobile teams. It's definitely not necessary, but if you're using a stationary team, you put yourself at the mercy of RNG and will likely have to reset a few times. Overall though, this boss is fairly simple once you work around the innate Hydro Aura. Next up, we have an Abyss Lector Violet Lightning with 800,000 HP, followed by a Millennial Pearl Seahorse with 1.8 million HP. The Lector from last month is back for more, but fortunately this time he doesn't have his buddy, so it's significantly less annoying. Once the Lector reaches low HP, he will become undamageable and set an Electro Shield that requires reactions to break. Once the shield breaks, he immediately dies. I'm going to save talking about how to break the shield for now, as the upcoming enemy also has an Electro Shield with the same weakness, so all there is to say about the Lector for now is to be mindful of his attacks once his shield is up, as they will drain your party energy, which can be a real pain once the main enemy spawns if you aren't at full energy. Once you break the Lector Shield, the Seahorse will spawn. It has 50% higher Electro Res than all other resists, so avoid using an Electro DPS here. Also, don't even bother attacking him right as he spawns, as he has over 200% all res before he puts up his crystal. Instead, use this window to make sure your energy is topped up across the board. Once the Seahorse puts up his crystal, he will gain an Electro Shield on his front half. His regular HP is still damaged by attacks, but he has 90% all res while the Pearl is up, so you should focus your efforts on breaking the Pearl. This Pearl, which is the same as the Electro Shield on the Lector, is weakest to Pyro, Dendro, and Cryo. Having an on-fielder of any of these elements will be a huge help in breaking the Electro Shields. Particular shout out to Bennett, who can spam skill inside of his burst to eat through this Electro Shield, even quicker with C6 Bennett. A single on-fielder of Cryo, Dendro, or Pyro is plenty to break the shield in a timely manner, but if you want to have an even comfier clear, adding an off-fielder of one of these elements will make this even faster. Once the crystal is low HP, the Seahorse will fly up in the middle of the arena and spawn 3 Electro Crystals. These crystals have the same weakness as the main Pearl on the body, and breaking all of them will break the Pearl and stun the boss, reducing all res by 80%. If you don't break them in time, the Pearl will heal for an amount based on how many crystals were left standing. You can also completely skip this by bursting down the Pearl as it gets low. The best way to do this is to kind of hold your damage until it starts an attack, because it won't be able to fly up while it's attacking. So if you burst it while the enemy is doing an attack, you can stun it and it will not fly up at all. Once you break the Pearl, the boss has fairly low max HP and low resist, so it should be pretty smooth sailing from there until it dies. Your main team building focus here needs to be bringing a good single target based team that features either Pyro, Cryo, or Dendro. In my opinion, even just a solo Bennett is more than enough to break the shields, but if you throw in a Shangling, Kaya, or Seedlolly with him, the shields will melt like butter. You can also run an on-field DPS of any of these elements like Risley, Arlecchino, or Alhaitham. In general though, be careful with using Dendro DPS here, as a typical Dendro DPS team uses Electro for Aggravate, and the heightened Electro res of the boss will play a small part in reducing your team DPS. Overall though, Dendro, Pyro, and Cryo all have access to some very strong units. Cryo may be a bit less than others, but even so, it should not be too much of a hassle to fit one of the 3 into your party. Now we have a Secret Source Automaton configuration device with 5 million HP. I don't know who invited this guy to come back for round 2, but here he is. If you watched last month's guide or are already familiar with this boss, nothing changed from last month other than the release of Eresa, who is actually very good in this fight. If you are not familiar with this enemy, he has a rage meter that fills up when the party members near him are in a Night Soul state. The more Night Soul characters, the faster it fills. When the meter is full, he will move to the side of the arena, use a laser attack, and then summon 2 pillars. You must climb these pillars and break the little things on top. Doing this stuns the boss and reduces all res by 90%. Engaging with this mechanic is essential as it has very high max HP and very high base resists, so you absolutely need this res shard to kill it in a reasonable amount of time. It will do the pillar mechanic naturally on its own without any Night Soul, but it takes a very long time to do this, and for the sake of this video, we will just say that you need an Atlan character. As for the pillar mechanic itself, here is a list of characters that can climb the pillar with their own abilities. But, literally every character in the game can actually climb the pillars with no abilities at all. The spot used will change depending on the height of the character, so check the Bilibili link in the description to watch the original creator's guide to this. In my opinion though, it isn't really worth learning these spots as the list of characters that can make it on their own is quite extensive, and many of them are very strong, so the extra effort really just isn't worth it to me. Anyways, the main team building constraint here is simply fitting an Atlan character into the party. As I mentioned earlier, with no Atlan character, this boss will take around 50 seconds through the pillars on its own, and that will be 50 seconds of bashing your head against 5 million HP with 60% all res. For this reason, it's essential to fit an Atlan character in the team, even if in theory it would be a damage loss. At the very least, everyone has a free Kachina, so worst comes to worst, you can slap Scroll Set and a Fav Lance on her and use her here. Beyond this, the boss doesn't have any one res different than the others, and no reactions have any particular advantage here. So your team should look to be your best single target bossing team that features a Natlan character. The only slight advantage being Navia teams, as they can utilize the Leyline buff and can easily slot Shalon in for Night Soul and Pillar Climbing. Fortunately, after that spooky first half, we have a relatively chill second half featuring a Suppression Specialist mech with 770,000 HP, followed by a Fluid Avatar of Lava with 1.4 million HP, followed by a Thundering Wyob Manifestation with 1.3 million HP. The mech is just a generic enemy with nothing special about it. The Avatar of Lava is also somewhat generic, but it does have 70% Pyro Resist and constant Pyro Aura. This is the tankiest enemy in this half HP-wise, so if you are struggling for time, avoid using a Pyro DPS on this half. Similar to the Hydro Aura from Chamber 1 first half, you can use the Pyro Aura to get free reactions, or just ignore it and kill the enemy normally. Next up, we have the Wyob. And I'm so tired of these guys being in Abyss because this is like the 4th time in a row I've had to explain what they do. So here we go again. Firstly, it has 50% Electro Res. Shortly after spawning, they will set up an Elementalist shield and constantly drain all energy from your party. The shield takes damage from, well, damage, taking extra from Night Soul Align damage. When the shield breaks, it stuns the enemy and gives your team a massive amount of energy, essentially full refilling your whole party. If the shield is not broken in time, it turns into an Electro Shield, and when the Electro Shield is broken, it stuns the enemy but does not refund energy. You should avoid getting to this at all costs, as the lack of energy refund means your whole party will be completely messed up and waste a ton of time farming ults back up. The best method for breaking the shield is to make sure that before finishing off the Lava Avatar, you still have bursts ready to go, and then as soon as the Wyob spawns, in the small window before it puts the shield up, slam all your bursts. That way, they will be active during the energy drain period and can be used to break the shield. And then the energy refund from breaking the shield will keep your rotations running smoothly. Alternatively, you can just put Chaska and 2-shot the shield without bursts. You can also freeze the Wyob and stop it from putting up the shield until the freeze ends, or hit it with a well-timed stagger to prevent it from shielding entirely. Though this is pretty difficult to consistently pull off, so I wouldn't rely solely on it. Since the majority of your team building restrictions come from the first half, you would pretty much just be using leftover options here, which is generally fine as the enemies are quite simple. If you do find yourself struggling with this chamber, try avoiding Electro or Pyro DPS, though if you have to choose one, Electro DPS will be better, as breaking through the Lava Avatar with Pyro is pretty rough. And if the Wyob shield is giving you trouble, consider putting some Night Soul damage to break it faster. There isn't much else to comment on here. Unfortunately, the difficulty of this chamber is pretty much at the mercy of the time and units you have left after the first half, as the enemies are pretty simple. Starting off the final chamber, in the first half we have 2 Hydro Mimic Boars with about 500k HP each, followed by 2 Hydro Local Legends with 2.7 and 3 million HP each. This chamber is literally like if you took the Tulpa and just split them up into multiple enemies. For the sake of not repeating myself again, the team building here is the exact same as against the Tulpa. The only difference is that maybe pure single target will be less effective against 2 targets, but teams that are purely single target are kinda rare nowadays anyways. The only modern DPS that suffers from this really is Chaska. The important part of this chamber is grouping. The mimics are easy to do this with, as they will just walk at you, but the local legends can be a bit trickier. One of them is melee oriented, and the other is range oriented. Stay near the one that is standing up taller and lobbing hydro shots at you, because the other one will naturally group itself as it is melee and needs to get close to attack you. Honestly though, I don't have much else to add here because I already said everything in the Tulpa part. Just make sure you manage your AoE damage effectively, and otherwise treat it the same as the Tulpa. Closing things out, we have 2 Xuanwen Beasts with 870,000 HP, followed by a Primordial Bathysmal Vishap with 1.6 million HP, followed by a Consecrated Horned Crocodile with 1.4 million HP. Every enemy on this chamber has a higher Hydro Res than other resists, so avoid bringing a Hydro DPS here. The Xuanwen Beasts are just basic enemies made to waste your time. The Vishap is slightly more complicated, but basically just a big punching bag. His bubble attack will drain your energy if you get hit by it, but the thing is that in all my Abyss runs through this video, I'm pretty sure I never saw him use it, because for some reason this dude gets staggered by a light breeze. You can probably see it in the background footage that he just straight up never gets up to attack because he is completely stun locked. The knockback from this can be both a good thing and a bad thing depending on how you utilize it. If you fight the enemy head on, he'll get knocked into a wall and start sliding around the edge of the arena, which is a huge pain. Instead, you'll want to walk behind him and sort of knock him towards the middle of the arena. Once he's close to the center, you can kind of circle around him as you attack to keep him locked in the center. That way, when the next enemy spawns, you are right on top of it already. Speaking of the next enemy, we have the return of the Consecrated Beast that terrorized the Abyss like a year and a half ago. And honestly, after all these Natlan enemies, this dude just kind of feels like a basic enemy. When he spawns, he'll increase his resist. There's nothing you can do about this until it chooses to use the attack where it spawns the little energy thing. Breaking this will do damage to the enemy, put its resist back down to normal, and stun it. It takes 6 elemental hits, or just 1 hit if Hydro. If not broken in time, the enemy will simply keep its resist and move on. Make sure that whatever you do, you focus the energy thing down when it spawns. It's not exactly hard to break, so don't stress over using a Hydro if it is not optimal for your team, as you are given plenty of time to break it with any element. Team building wise, once again the first half will be eating up your main resources. Generally, you should avoid a Hydro DPS here, but it's not really the end of the world, and if you have a particularly strong Hydro DPS, they can be your best option here. Otherwise, just play a team with good single target output, and take enemies down one at a time. It would also be beneficial, but not necessary, to bring a team with good mobility here. Characters that want to stay in place like Bennett or Kokumi will have trouble with the second enemy being staggered all over the place and the third enemy just jumping all over the arena. It is possible to do this with Bennett or any other stationary unit. You just need to be mindful of enemy AI manipulation and knockback management to stay in your circle consistently. Thankfully, this month we have a lot more options than previously, though Hydro mains are definitely suffering right now. As I always say, the best strategy for getting more stars is to take things one chamber at a time, and reset to swap teams as you move along. But if you do want to go through it in one run, in the first half you definitely need to prioritize your team building around the first and third chambers. This would mean running a Pyro, Dendro, or Electro DPS, or using a team that is not reliant on reactions. This would also mean that the only Hydro character that is even remotely okay to use here is Farina, and even she is reduced in value compared to if you run her on the second half. As I mentioned a few times already, Navia and Shiori are especially good here, as their raw damage is very high, and they can benefit from the skill damage bonus Leyline Disorder. You also should make sure to bring a Natline character for the second chamber. If you were lucky enough to get her already, Yansan actually performs very nicely as a buffer for many teams that can also provide Night Soul for the second chamber. But worst comes to worst, you can use Scroll Kachina in place of one of your supports. Since the majority of the restrictions and time losses come from the first half, you should focus on having a strong first half team, and then use any remaining units for the second half. As for the teams themselves, you need to make sure to have an Electro Shield Breaker, so a Pyro, Cryo, or Dendro unit with solid application. The more of these you have, the easier your first chamber will be. You'll most likely be unable to find a team for the second half that can completely get around all enemy resists, as there is quite a variety across the board. Using an Electro DPS will make your first chamber slower, Pyro will make your second slower, and Hydro will make your third slower. Personally though, I think Hydro is the least punishing in this case, which works well with the fact that the first half is Hydro immune. The third chamber enemies are pretty easy even with Hydro, and Hydro has some crazy units like Farina and Nivelette that do so much damage that the enemies might as well not have any Hydro res. Aside from one way, the second chamber is also entirely single target, so you want simply a team with good single target output and good Electro Shield Break. I guess now is a good time for my disclaimer of the month. When Escoffier comes out, it is pretty safe to assume that she will make this half much easier. But don't be pressured to pull if you don't like her or don't want her, because when you consider the cost of a whole 5-star unit versus what you earn from an extra 1 or 2 stars on Abyss, the choice is pretty easy. Anyways, that's going to be it from me today. If you think I missed anything important, drop a comment below, and I'll add any new info to the pinned comment. And once again, if this guide was helpful, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.